In this easy painting tutorial for beginners, we will go through how to paint an owl in watercolor pencils step by step. In this easy painting tutorial, I will tell you why color pencils are so great and how to use watercolor pencils, in what situations watercolor pencils are the best, and what the difference is between normal watercolor paint and watercolor pencils. If you enjoy this tutorial and you want to learn more about painting, make sure you check out my watercolor painting playlist. There's lots of tutorials in there and I really hope to see some of your creations pop up on Instagram or on Facebook. I was gifted some art materials by Blue Acorn and I'm very keen to try them out. I think the packaging is just beautiful. I'm going to go for the watercolor pencils. I have not used that for a while. So let's open this and create some art together. There we go. I would very much like to make an animal portrait. So we're going to draw an owl. You don't need this specific set to join in with this tutorial. Just grab yourself some watercolor pencils and get ready to make some art with me. I look forward to showing you that you don't need hundreds of different colors to create a beautiful artwork. Just a few colors is enough. This is a set with 12 pencils, so 12 colors, and I don't think I'll even use all of them. And I'll show you that just with a small set you can create a colorful and vibrant picture. Watercolor pencils look at first glance exactly the same as normal color pencils, but there's one big difference. The lead of a watercolor pencil is water soluble, and that gives you a whole new range of opportunities to blend your colors and to make them into a painting, and it's a lot of fun to do. I use my watercolor pencils a lot when I am traveling or when I'm doing urban sketching, because I use them to create sort of a base painting, a base drawing. When I get back home or to a place where I have access to water, I can use some water and a brush and create these drawings into a painting, and it's a lot of fun to do. It's quite an easy way of traveling with a small amount of materials and to have the opportunity to make paintings. I started this owl in the same way as I would any other color pencil drawing, by making a really light sketch and then color blocking each area out. Don't worry about adding details yet or about blending the colors. This is just about deciding what rough colors are going in which place. You can find a template to make this sketch on my website. I created really easy templates for you to get started with your drawings, because I know a lot of people find it hard to set up a sketch. So if you want to get started with those, head over to my website and you can download them there for free. So far I'm just adding light layers of pencil to my paper. I'm using specific watercolor paper, and the reason that I would always recommend using watercolor paper with watercolor pencils is that you're very likely to add water to your paper and you want to use paper that can stand that water, that can hold it. So make sure that you use paper that is thick enough and that is meant to be used with water. That also means that my paper, because it is cold pressed, has a bit of grain to it. Cold pressed paper usually has a bit of tooth, a bit of grain, a bit of grit, lots of different words you can use to it, and you can see that shine through my drawing at this stage. I have zoomed in here a little bit to see if I can show you. It's very small, so it's hard to show you. You can see that some of the white of the paper shines through the pencil. That is because there's a bit of little holes and a bit of texture onto the paper. As soon as you add water, that disappears. So if that happens to your drawing, don't worry about it. It will get resolved in time. I'm just adding a pattern of colors onto the owl's body, and I'm going to make this quite a colorful artwork. I like creating fantasy color animals and make things just a little bit more vibrant than they might be in reality. So I'm going to use lots of oranges and pinks and reds into this coat for this animal. But for now I'm just sort of color blocking each area out and also adding a little bit more color in the eyes. These colors will mix up once they get wet, so I know I have to be mindful of that. Keeping my light colors a little bit separate from my dark colors. I'm just going to go all over my paper with each color in turn. Something that is important to keep in mind is that for areas of your picture that you want to keep white, keep them free of any color pencil. Even if you have a white pencil, which I have not today, it's very hard to make an area where you have paint or where you have color on it back to white. So any areas that you want to keep white, so maybe around the owl's eyes or around its beak, or maybe there's other areas that you want to keep white, make sure you just leave them white from the start. Don't add any color pencil to them. You may have noticed that I have increased the speed of my video a little bit, just because otherwise it would be very boring to watch. It would take a really long time. But keep in mind that if you are drawing along with me, that things might take a little bit longer for you. Take your time, there's absolutely no rush. You can always pause my video a few times if you want to catch up and just really work at your own pace. I think that art should be a mindful, calm activity. Yes, it can be fun, but the whole purpose of it is just to relax and to enjoy the process and not to worry too much about making something quick. If you want to make a quick drawing, I advise just using a smaller bit of paper, and that way you can still give the same amount of attention to each piece of your paper as you would do when you create a larger piece with more time. You can also see that I slowly start to increase my layering of the color pencil. So I'm just adding a second layer of red and making my colors a little bit more vibrant. The eyes are a little bit more vibrant now. And there's different ways of working in watercolor pencil. I'm adding quite a lot of color to the paper from the start. And when I make it wet, that is sort of my only layer that I'm going to paint with. You can also paint this first layer really thinly. Make it wet, let it dry completely and then add second layers. This is also an option. But because the coat of this owl is quite rough, I'm quite happy just to go in fairly dark, and because this is a beginner's painting, just do one layer of color pencil and one layer of water. Please keep in mind though that there's different ways of doing it. Everyone has their own techniques and every artist uses slightly different ways of doing things. I am starting to add a bit of black to my drawing, and black is a very overpowering color. You have to be a little bit careful when you use it. So I started with brown, which is a bit softer, and now with black I'm just changing the edges a little bit. You can see I made this brow on this eye a little bit lower. I felt like that shape connected a little bit better to the other eye. So you can see I'm just slowly starting to add in the darkest shadows on this picture. And I'm keeping the strokes of my pencil very light. I do find that watercolor pencils tend to be a bit more vibrant than normal color pencils of the same brand. The fact that the inside that the lead is water soluble means that it is a little bit softer usually, and the color tends to be a bit more vibrant than than what you might be used to with normal color pencils. And that is a really nice thing, but it also means that you need to be a little bit careful when you apply dark colors such as black or red or dark blue. So I'm starting to add some shadows here around the beak, alternating with some darker strokes and some lighter strokes. And I'm okay with the strokes of my pencil in the feathers to be a little bit rough around the edges. I don't have to blend this all out perfectly later on. It's not a smooth animal, so it's okay if you can see some of the pencil strokes shine through on the feathers. In the eye, however, I want this to be very smooth. This is a very different texture. An eye is smooth and round and a bit shiny, so I want the texture on the eye to be very smooth. So I make sure that my strokes on that eye are very smooth as well. What I like about using watercolor pencils over paint is that you can add a lot of detail from the start. You have a lot of opportunity to think about small areas of your painting, small strokes. You can add a lot of detail to your painting. It does take a little bit longer. If I would make this painting with traditional sort of watercolor paint and a brush, the first layers, the color blocking would be much faster. So it's a slightly different way of working, and it really depends on your personal preference or maybe what you fancy doing on a specific day. I do think the benefit is also that you can make this drawing, just leave it. It's very little amount of mess. No cups of water and stuff like that you have to worry about falling over. So you can start this drawing, leave it, go do something else, and then come back to it without having to worry about creating a mess or things drying in between. So far, all we've used is the pencil, so there's no drying time yet. So the beak is very dark, so I'm just slowly increasing those values. So far this is very similar to making a normal color pencil drawing. So some of these feathers have quite a lot of shadow underneath and in between. And I'm making this up a little bit. The pattern of the feathers, you can sort of make them really small or quite large depending on what you prefer. I'm also starting to think at this point of making the background dark, because owls are night creatures and I think having a dark background would work really well. But so far I'm keeping the background white. If I make it dark, I will use some gouache to paint that in, because it's a little bit faster, and to do this entire background area in color pencils just take a really long time. So I'm not doing that, I'm just leaving it white for now. So adding some yellow areas to the fur, to the feathers I should say. And as I said, I really like my art style is very colorful. I like adding a little bit of fantasy colors and just making everything a little bit more rainbow than they might be in reality. I think often in nature there's so many colors hidden in other colors, and I just love pushing the boundaries of my colors a little bit. So I'm adding some yellow and some orange, some pinks to that fur. Doesn't have to be hyper realistic in my opinion. If you want to keep the colors of your owl a little bit more realistic, stick with the browns, maybe add in a little bit of yellow because that will blend in together, and some black, and then that can be enough to make a more realistic coloring on the feathers. You might also have more colors than I have today. If you have different colors, brown or beige, feel free to use those. You can see my color is slowly getting more vibrant. My picture is getting more vibrant. You can also see that I am using quite rough strokes on the feathers, not completely smoothed out. So time to start adding some water. This is the exciting part and a little bit scary of watercolor pencil drawings. This brush is quite small, I might swap to a bigger brush at some point. And I'm going to start on the lightest part, and this is very important. Always start on the lightest parts of each area. And make sure you clean your brush really well in between. Because if you blend some of the black or the brown and you go back into a lighter color, the colors will get muddy and mix up. So really make sure, I can't stress this enough, start on the lightest colors and then work towards the darker colors, and try to keep your colors a bit separate in that way. So I'm starting with the yellows here. You can blend some of the oranges and the blacks, but make sure you clean your brush really well before you go back into a light color. And you can see this is just like magic. I really find this a lot of fun. This is just like magic. The color pencil strokes turn into paint, and you can even lift some of some areas and then move them into other areas, just as you would if you were painting. Starting with the lightest areas, and you can see how instantly my picture will look more vibrant. Going over these blacks, and then after I do black I need to make sure I really clean my brush. I don't want the colors to become muddy. The colors can bleed into each other as well, similar as what can happen with watercolor paint. But usually, because of the nature of this material, you have a bit more control about where your paint is going and where splashes happen. You can make a really loose painting, of course, it doesn't have to be realistic. But you have a bit more control about where you want, where you want things to turn up. If you work with a big brush and wet paint, but sometimes your painting is a little bit more unpredictable. I'm working on A4 paper and I found that this brush is a little bit small. So it's okay for these small areas. I'll swap to a larger brush soon. I have a terrible cold at the moment, so my voiceover is not perfect. But I think sometimes getting things done is more important than perfection, and I can't wait until my cold has passed before I record this. So I'm sorry if I sound a little bit husk, but it's just the way it is. I'm sure I'll be better soon. It is not COVID, I've tested. It's just a cold. Which is also a bit ironic because it's about 30 degrees here in the UK. So everyone's sitting in the pool trying to keep cool and I'm having a cold. It's just ridiculous. So you can see I swapped to a larger brush just because it's a bit faster. And I'm going to go over these feathers and slowly blending the colors in. It's a little bit more water. And when I go over the blacks, you have to be very careful not to accidentally mix them up with the yellows, unless you want the colors to mix up, of course. So when you're rubbing the paper, be a little bit careful of where you put your brushes and what colors you're mixing up. And I think the color that this owl is getting, this reddish sort of brown look, I'm very happy with it. I think it's very vibrant and fun. I like how he's giving me the side eyes a little bit, looking at us around the corner of this paper, just wondering what we're doing. I am going to make the background very dark today. And I'm mixing up some gouache. I'm using a mix of dark blue and black. And I made sure that the owl is completely dry. I do not want the black that I'm adding to this background to bleed in with the owl. And you can see I'm going in with really intense colors. Really thick. Just because I really want that pitch black sort of nighttime dark feeling. And I'm quite happy for some blue and some black to sort of be a little bit separate in places. Have a bit of wet on wet effects in the background. But I need to be careful around the edges. So this looks very fast the way I am filming it today. In this slightly speed up video. But I'm being very careful, especially around the edges. Dropping in a little bit more blue paint. I think this looks much better. I love a dark background on a picture. It instantly gives that nighttime feel on this bird. There we go. And I have a little bit more magic to add to the picture. And that is a little bit of salt. So I'm just lightly sprinkling some salt over that wet background and let the magic happen. There we go, it's all dry. This is what my picture looks like. And you can see the salt is still on the paper, but it creates these really interesting and fun flourishes on the background. Once your picture is completely dry, and I need to really state the importance of it being dry, you can go in and add some more detail with your color pencils. If your paper is still a little bit damp, or even a little bit wet, it's very fragile and you might damage your picture. So be really careful, make sure it's completely dry, but you can use your pencils to add like smaller strokes and a little bit more color and a bit more texture to your painting. Adding in a bit more pink. I just want some areas to be a little bit more vibrant. I think that is a lot of fun and I just see if I can make the colors pop a little bit more by adding some of this hard pink in, some oranges. The fun thing about making art with color pencil or watercolor pencil is that you can layer lighter colors over darker colors, and it depends a bit on the brand how well it works, but it's really fun to go in on like this black of the eyes, for example, and go in with a light color and add in some highlights. And here on the edges I can use my pencil to make a little bit of this soft fluffy feathers sort of over that dark black and blue on the background. And it's something that yeah, with normal watercolor paint is really hard to do, but with color pencils or watercolor pencils gives you some extra opportunities. So if you wanted, you could go over this with water again and blend out the colors that you just added. You don't have to, I'm not going to today, but if you find your picture still a little bit light, you can definitely go in and add yeah, a second layer of color before you add your details. And that you just make sure that every time you start adding a new layer of pencil that your paper is completely dry. You can see I'm adding some white pencil from a different set to give some of these fluffy white feathers on the edges. It's something that I love doing. I'm really curious to see if anyone is joining in with me today. So if you have made your own version of this artwork, make sure you share it on Facebook or on Instagram and that you tag me in your picture. I really love to see all your creations. It gives me so much joy to know that I've inspired people to make some art. And yeah, remember that if you want to have some help with setting up your sketch, that you can download the free template from my website. It's in my shop. I'll put a link underneath to this template. Make sure that you always work with sharp pencils when you're drawing in color pencil. And I forgot to say this in the beginning because it was a new set and all the tips of my pencils were very sharp. But just a little tip at the end, make sure that you work with sharp pencils. It just makes your life so much easier, and especially at the detail stage. In the beginning, when you're just layering colors, it doesn't matter so much, but when you want to add details, make sure that your pencils are lovely and sharp, because it just makes everything a little bit easier. Make sure you subscribe to this channel if you enjoyed this tutorial. I am sharing weekly art classes, painting, drawing, lots of different type of materials on this channel, and I'm sharing 2 classes a week. It's time to take the tape off this paper and shake off the salt. Once your paper is completely dry, just really gently shake off the salt and maybe rub it off with your fingers. I always really enjoy the tape peel and this beautiful white edge that you have around your paper. So let me know if you enjoyed this. So thank you so much for being here with me. My name is Irene from Makings and Musings, and I'll see you around soon. Bye bye.